EA Sports.
It's only a game.
Covering Dead Space intimidates me. I love this game with a passion, and I've been trying for the better part of a year to write a script to explain that love. If this ever becomes published, it would be the third attempt I've made. I'm afraid of doing it a disservice because of how formative this game was in my life. For those who don't know, Dead Space is a third-person survival horror game. Well, at least under my own definitions of the term. Dead Space was crafted by what was EA Redwood Shores, an internal EA studio that would eventually go on to become Visceral Games. The studio had been perpetually stuck doing licensed games since its inception. Dead Space was supposed to be a sort of proving ground to create their own IPs. EA gave them 3 months to build a vertical slice in the beginning of 2006. For those who don't know, a vertical slice is a demo made for publishers as a means to convince them to continue funding the development of a project. 18 months later, following the development of an impressive vertical slice and an intense internal campaign to get the game made, Daddy EA gave the green light. In any case, this one level was included into the game, and within the next 10 months, the team had created the rest of the game. It is around here where I step into this tale for a moment. I was like 12 when Dead Space came out. The first time Dead Space entered my brain space was in the cover story of a Game Informer the year prior. I saw the trailer, watched an LP of the first level, and was hooked. I tried to convince my parents to buy it for me since I was but a child and this was an M-rated game. They said no, but I managed to convince my grandmother to buy it for me one day. I got shifty eyes from the GameStop employee, but I knew he wouldn't turn down a sale. Turns out, age ratings might exist for a reason, because Dead Space gave me some nightmares and some uncomfortable thoughts about the nature of reality. But in the long term, it has also given me an understanding and appreciation for the talent, hard work, and creativity that goes into making projects like Dead Space. Dead Space is available to play on PC, but it has some definite problems. The physics break down above 60 frames per second. I couldn't walk through the 5th door in the game because of the uncapped frame rate. But it's okay, just turn on VSync, which will have your frame rate. Alright, open your graphics control panel, force VSync out of the game, and limit your frames to 60. The mouse look is also terrible, but can be corrected using this fix. I actually don't recommend using a mouse and prefer a gamepad instead. I'd also like to point out that the mouse fix breaks gamepad support, so you'll have to commit to one or the other. I'm absolutely in love with the art direction and just how grounded everything is in universe. This game's UI kicks ass to this day and is easily understandable at a glance. Isaac's health is displayed on his back. Every weapon has a holographic ammo counter that displays when you aim. Your stasis meter is on your shoulder. The inventory and menu display in-world, and the game continues to play behind it. Isaac moves his head to look at what is being highlighted on screen. Everything you can see, the characters can see and interact with. Almost everything serves an in-universe function outside the video gamey aspect to it. This helps to suspend disbelief and immerse myself into Dead Space more than most other games. Before I geek out more, I do want to say how good this game still looks on a technical level. A few of the character models are a bit iffy, and some of the texture work can be low res, but the lighting really holds up after all these years later. Some of these rooms are made all the more threatening by just simple changes in lighting. Now that I think about it, there are a number of AAA games that came out after 2008 that look objectively worse. It is also a fairly dark game. Your only reliable light is often the pitiful beam coming from your own weapon. The game's environments are the innards of a cramped mining ship, which give the game a claustrophobic feel. Rooms are covered in blood, graffiti, and environmental storytelling. Every area of the ship you visit is distinct in purpose, whether it's the medical bay, the bridge, or the crew quarters. Despite the variety, you do end up backtracking through several areas in the game. I often felt that these were well done remixes of those past levels and allowed you to explore areas that had been locked off otherwise. The necromorphs are the main source of horror in Dead Space, and their macabre displays of body horror. Heavily influenced by John Carpenter's The Thing, each creature you discover is more bizarre than the last. The animation work is stellar overall, with creatures changing up their animations depending on how many limbs they still have. The death animations in particular have their own infamy, with 2 in particular being my favorite. Apparently trying to make those tentacle grab sequences almost broke the game and developers. Glenn Schofield talks about it in an Ars Technica video I would recommend watching. There's an oppressive atmosphere to Dead Space that is created both visually and acoustically. In fact, the ambient sound work is some of the best in video games. If you stand in an area, you can hear pipes clattering, automated reminders playing over the intercom, whispering voices, and sometimes the growls of things hunting you. Many of the monster sounds are burnt into my brain at this point, though they can be very quiet. There are a few times when the sound is at different levels of quality. That can be jarring and reminds my brain that it's a video game. The voice acting of characters and audio logs are exceptional. Many of them tell the stories of the ill-fated crew's last days.
Personal log. Acting Chief Engineer Jacob Temple. It's been 2 days since they pulled that planet open, since the captain died. The panic, the riots, they were nothing compared with what came after. Our friends, our co-workers, started coming back. Changed, coming back to kill us, drag us away.
Props especially go to Dr. Mercer's voice actor, Naveed. I'm sorry, because he is absolutely nailing the mad scientist.
What are you? Your fight for survival is admirable but pointless. And yet you keep on going. It almost makes me think that we had hope as a species. Am I the only one who sees that we have died out a long time ago? We just haven't accepted it yet. Stop running. Stop your struggle. Our future, your future, the future of our race ends here.
Isaac is scared silent, but he has different grunts and breathing noises depending on his health and oxygen state. All of this is to say that the sound work of Dead Space is legendary. Most of the game's music is related to combat or the reveals of monsters. They aren't subtle cues, but do help drive the scares home. Before actually talking about the gameplay, I'm just going to give my recommendations for first-time players. Play on at least medium and with a gamepad. Always carry one power node on you. There are these locked doors you can open with them. They're always worth opening. Remove the limbs of any dead body you find. Use whatever weapon you like. I'm gonna give you my opinions on the weapons, but don't take them as law. Just based on the experiences of a player who has too many hours into this janky sci-fi horror game. Not to mention all the time I spent on the 360. Speaking of janky, boy are these games physics whack. It uses the Havoc physics engine. Havoc is used in a lot of games, but it seems to be weirdly implemented here. It probably doesn't help that Dead Space was built upon the foundation of their strange proprietary engine that powered the Tiger Woods PTA Tour series and the Godfather game. No, I'm not kidding. Collisions are especially weird AF. Body parts can get stuck into walls and doors, aiming can do weird things near walls, and I've even had a brute phase through a door. All of this to say, while I think Dead Space is one of the greatest games of all time, it's also extraordinarily flawed. But these are all flaws that I either cherish or can live with. And it's a testament to what a team of professionals can create when given a bit of time, resources, and creative freedom. From a gameplay perspective, it's Resident Evil 4 in space. The camera angle is the same, there's a shop and upgrade system, items can be found in the environment, and there's a focus on action over horror. Frankly, it fucking rules. Combat sections are interspersed with empty, bloody rooms, scares, and set pieces. While the game does set a good atmosphere, most if not all the horror comes from jump scares. And the game uses the same tricks over and over again, rarely playing with your expectations. The most apt description I've heard comes from Mandalore in his own video about Dead Space, being that it's a haunted house ride. In fact, go watch that, it's a much better video than this one. Dead Space's combat is visceral because it involves severing the limbs of your enemies. I love how it flips the usual trope of headshots and forces you to aim elsewhere. The game's just a bit too heavy-handed in letting you know.
Listen, forget about shooting him in the body. You gotta cut off the limbs. Grab a cutter, anything like that. Cut them apart.
Shooting them in the body didn't seem to work. Go for the limbs. Dismember them. That should do the job.
Conserve ammo by dismembering enemy limbs and doing extra.
You have a stasis module that can slow necromorphs down, allowing for breathing room in combat. The kinesis module lets you pick up items at a distance and throw high explosives with abandon. Both of these modules can have silly results when used separately or combined. The weapons are the shining stars of Dead Space. They're wholly unique in the fact that they're, for the most part, future industrial tools, and there's only one actual gun. Every weapon has a main fire and an alternative fire mode to cause mass workplace accidents. Starting with the plasma cutter, which is the undisputed champion amongst all the weapons. It is the first and most perfect weapon you acquire. The plasma cutter fires plasma bolts in a vertical or horizontal line depending on the weapon's orientation. This is set by the alternate fire because the primary fire is so good that all you have to do is remix it to make it better. To prove its worth, most of the footage is of me playing through a fresh new game on impossible difficulty with only the plasma cutter. It's such a good weapon, you really don't need anything else. The plasma rifle is the real gun in Dead Space. It's not exactly the best at dismemberment, but it is the best at spitting the most rounds in the least amount of time. Its secondary is weird and sprays the area around you, killing anything nearby at the expense of too much ammo. The flamethrower is hot garbage. Don't use it. The line cutter is pretty good even if I hardly ever touch it. It's a larger, horizontal-only plasma cutter with a time bomb as the alternate. The biggest issue I have is that the ammo takes up a ton of space in my inventory. The force gun is fine. You can either knock down enemies to death or hit them with a concentrated blast of kinetic energy. I'm not really a fan of it, but it can be fun to use. The Ripper is god tier on premise alone. It floats a spinning saw blade in mid-air in front of the user. The alternate lets you shoot buzz saws in a straight line, ideally at faraway enemies with too many limbs. It is a mainstay in my usual arsenal. The contact beam makes problems go away. It takes a second to charge, but once it does, anything you aim at is losing limbs or they're unlife. It's my usual choice for fighting bosses. The secondary has Isaac slam the thing to the ground, dealing damage in a concussive wave around him, though I'm not sure how he isn't hurt despite standing right next to the epicenter of the blast. The shop is where you acquire these weapons along with heavier duty armor. Each level of armor gives you access to more inventory space and absorbs a marginally larger amount of damage. Otherwise, the shop exists only to sell inferior ammo types, store all my health kits, and purchase more power nodes. These power nodes are used at benches to upgrade your weapons, modules, and your suit. Each upgrade slot consumes a node, and these nodes are non-refundable, so spend wisely. The necromorphs have some of the most interesting enemy designs I've ever seen, though I will throw shade at the stronger variants, which are just black retextures of existing enemies. There are several types of slashers: the Leaper, Dead Babies, Infectors, Explodey Boys, The Thing, Prego Sauce, Rhino Man, and this asshole who keeps growing back his legs. Not to mention the boss creatures. Everything you see is something that is made with the reconstituted mass of the dead crew. These things want to destroy all life at a molecular level and are driven by the need to create more biomatter. Each necromorph provides their own unique challenges and sometimes requirements to destroy. For example, while you can usually cut off a slasher's legs, there are some that will actually reflect damage. This is because the person was wearing leg armor in real life, forcing the players to target the arms. The necromorphs can move quick, so use stasis often to prevent yourself from becoming overwhelmed. That being said, infectors are always my priority targets. They make more necromorphs and I'm not having any of that. Just look at these ugly things. There are quite a number of set pieces throughout the game. Most are often some form of future tech that you invariably fix. Sometimes this is done in the zero gravity or vacuum environment that Isaac has to navigate. My greatest complaint about Dead Space comes from one of these set piece sections. Specifically anything to do with these asteroid defense cannons. They are random turret sections in the middle of my survival horror game that feel weirdly appropriate yet out of place. The cannon control's awful. It's often not entirely clear what will constitute as a hit on the whole or not. Thankfully, you only are forced to interact with it twice, but I grumble every fucking time. I don't think I've talked about the elevators yet. They're my other main gripe with the game. Dead Space was designed for the Xbox 360, so they are clearly loading elevators and can usually last a fair amount of time. And I'm fine with that, it's just that there are so many elevators. The story of Dead Space is quite good, if not entirely subtle at times. But the story that is told is compelling and thought-provoking. Most of the game's backstory is in collectible audio, text, and video logs that help to give an understanding of the events that occurred. Space engineer Isaac Clarke is responding to a distress call from the USG Ishimura, a planet-cracking mining vessel. His goal is to repair the ship and find his girlfriend Nicole. An additional goal of surviving a living nightmare is added at about minute 5. Everything happening on the Ishimura seems to be stemming from an artifact called the Marker that had been found on the planet below. A future-space religion called Unitology worships it as divine. What becomes of Isaac and the Marker is best left behind spoilers. Just know that it is a story that has had free rent space in my head for the better part of 13 years. So if you want to avoid spoilers for Dead Space and its greater universe, go here. The basic plot of Dead Space is like a mashup of Aliens and The Thing with a sprinkling of cosmic horror. For background, nearly 200 years into the future, the government found an artifact called the Marker. This was the thing that slammed into the Earth 65 million years ago, wiping out the dinosaurs. This artifact had the propensity to make people around it go crazy and reanimate dead corpses. A government researcher named Michael Altman leaked the existence of the Marker, accidentally founding Unitology, which is totally not Scientology. Eventually, another government was able to create a copy of the Marker and activate it on a backwater planet to test it. The testing went horribly. Everyone involved in the project was shot and nearly all records expunged. This brings us now to the present day in 2508, when an illegal mining operation uncovers the Marker, unleashing the nightmare once more. A distress signal is eventually sent out along with a video to our main character Isaac. Most of the story involves fixing different problems aboard the Ishimura while trying to figure out how to escape it. Kendra is usually giving you objectives, Hammond is constantly disappearing, Kyne is crazy, and Mercer is menacing. Isaac even encounters Nicole a few times. You eventually decide to return the Marker to the planet in an attempt to stop the nightmare, only to be betrayed by Kendra. It turns out she was working for the government all along and is going to bring it back to them. She fails in her endeavors, but when you see her again on the planet's surface, she gives Isaac a cold dose of reality. Nicole is dead. Isaac had seen what the Marker had wanted him to see. Kendra gets bodied by the hive mind, you slap the hive mind and escape the planet. Before the screen fades to black, Isaac is attacked by a hallucination of Nicole. Playing through Dead Space again gives you an appreciation for things to come. Like how, if you listen carefully enough, even in the early game you can hear the slightest of whispers. The implication being that from the moment Isaac stepped onto the ship, the Marker was already affecting his mind. It leads my brain down a hole where the events of the game might be unreliable. How many of those necromorphs Isaac encountered were real? Did he really interact with other survivors, or were they just hallucinations brought on by the Marker for some greater purpose? What does real even mean? I don't know, but the detail that the Marker causes hallucinations makes me question the nature of reality itself in a way I'm not sure the developers intended, and I love it. For a deeper analysis, Dead Space is a story about dealing with grief. Because from the time the game begins, Isaac has knowledge that the player doesn't. At the beginning of the game, a video of Isaac's girlfriend Nicole plays in what seems to be a distress call from her posting on the USG Ishimura. The full video isn't shown until the very end of the game when it is revealed that Nicole has been dead this entire time. That distress call was actually a goodbye to Isaac. It's not entirely subtle that something was wrong the few times you actually come across your spooky girlfriend.
Isaac, make us whole again.
But this video gives the game a much greater context upon replay. Isaac knows that Nicole is dead, but allows the Marker to manipulate him because it gives him a sense of hope, that maybe what he saw was just a scrambled video. It is the sense of hope that is dashed by Kendra's revelations. Upon escaping the planet and leaving the Ishimura behind, we come across an uncomfortable truth, that Isaac never actually found Nicole. He never got confirmation or the ability to say goodbye. Her remains could be still skulking the Ishimura or locked in a closet, but Isaac, and by extension the player, will never know. And it's this lack of closure that leads to the guilt that drives Isaac forward in Dead Space 2. In all, I highly recommend Dead Space. It is one of my favorite games of all time and I am unabashedly biased toward it. It's a game I typically play at least once a year just to experience it all again. Dead Space is a tad expensive at $20, but it can usually go on sale for $5 every now and then. I would recommend picking it up sooner rather than later though. The rumor mill is abound about a Dead Space remake, and knowing Papa EA, this version could disappear or never go on sale again. As far as the remake goes, well, time will only tell if it's even real. But I've got $5 on Unitology will either be missing altogether or play a much lesser role in the universe. Thanks for watching.